Being the original player character, Red has made a few reoccurring appearances throughout the history of the main series Pokemon games, but as the OG, what if Red was in every Pokemon region? Upon completing his adventures in the Kanto games, the next time that you see Red chronologically wouldn't be Johto, but instead, it would be the Hoenn games. This is based on the official Pokemon timeline, as it states that Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald take place around the same time that the Kanto games do, but that's the problem. They're happening around the same time. So for Red to make a physical appearance in Hoenn, we first need to leave little tidbits of information throughout the games that indicates that Red is completing his journey in Kanto, so that it makes sense for him to appear later on in Hoenn. Luckily for us, Hoenn is notorious for its news. Gabby and Tai are optional characters that you can battle across the Hoenn games, as they're looking for strong trainers throughout the region. And after every time you beat them, they ask the player character for an interview where we give some bogus one-word answer about the various questions that they ask. How do I feel about our battle today? I feel oi or yahoo! These interviews are optional, and there are 6 different times that you can battle Gabby and Tai throughout the games, the third one being after Fortree City on Route 120. Here, I would make it so that as long as you give Gabby and Tai an interview once either during this battle or before this battle, they would throw a little tidbit about how they're so excited to be following the progress of your journey, and how they've heard rumors about a prodigy just like yourself in Kanto who just recently beat the Kanto League, the one that refuses to give an interview, and how they're thrilled that you're cooperative enough to help them and the Hoenn media. This not only gives context to where Brendan and May would be upon Red completing his journey, which would be Red beating the league sometime before Brendan and May get their 6th badge, but it also gives them time to arrive in Kanto while Brendan and May are completing the rest of the events in Hoenn. It also gives Red characterization that's true to his character, because as we know from Pokopia, Red didn't give any interviews until he reached old age. So now that we know that Red is done at this point in time, by interacting with the TVs, we can now possibly see replays of his battle against Blue, or just moments of his adventure, just something that's randomly triggered by the TVs at this point, irrespective of whether you got the optional dialogue with Gabby and Tai, so that players still have the chance to get this knowledge in case they skipped out on their one-word interview. The games would continue as normal, and it wouldn't be until the post-game where Red appears in Emerald, not in Ruby and Sapphire, because unfortunately, Ruby and Sapphire's post-game doesn't give much room for Red to appear, but that's okay because Emerald is still the definitive Hoenn Pokemon game anyways. There are 2 places where I think it makes sense for Red to appear: Faraway Island and the Battle Frontier. Faraway Island was an event location that was only accessible in Emerald. None of the other Gen 3 games had this event location, and to be honest, most of the people who played Emerald didn't have access to Faraway Island anyways, because Faraway Island was a location that was only accessible through the Old Sea map, which was an item that was only distributed at a 2005 Japanese exclusive Nintendo event via mystery gift. What were they thinking? And once you had the Old Sea map and you had beat the Elite Four and Champion, you could travel to Faraway Island to battle and obtain the mythical Pokemon Mew. Assuming that this event was made public for everyone and that was just somehow a part of these games, this gives Red the perfect opportunity to appear in Hoenn. Red, upon his completion of the Kanto Pokedex, could hear that there's one more Pokemon that he needs to obtain, a Pokemon that he's heard many rumors about upon his time in Cinnabar Island and Pokemon Mansion, Mew. And upon finding an Old Sea map himself through Professor Oak, he lands in Hoenn, which takes him to the island, only to arrive moments after Brendan and May catch Mew themselves. Red appears with an exclamation mark over his head and stands there quietly as he realizes that you've captured the Pokemon, and so he turns back and heads off. A small encounter to show that even though that he's the very best, he still has a long ways to go, and that the other protagonists still rival him in many ways. The Battle Frontier is also a good place for Red to be, as either before or after these events, he could appear as a possible random NPC in the Battle Factory. This would be a means for us to see Red train and learn more about Pokemon using rental Pokemon instead of his own. And so, beating him here doesn't feel like a true win against him, but rather a fun little Easter egg to see his progress and continuous growth. And that's the thing. We need to be strategic about Red's appearances, because while I haven't said it explicitly yet, I don't think it makes sense to have every protagonist battle and be stronger than Red. It kind of demeans him. With each appearance of Red, we want to show Red's progress and growth as a trainer, and how each of the protagonists rival him, not that they're necessarily better. Before we move on to the Johto games, we need to address the elephant in the room, the Mega Timeline versus the non-Mega Timeline. Keeping Let's Go out of this for the entire video, we know that in the Alola games, Red has obtained a Mega Ring, as he's able to Mega Evolve the Kanto starters, and so that means that we need to address Red and Oras. Here, I would have the same continuity happen for Red with Gabby and Tai and the news on TV. Assuming that Oras did eventually have a Battle Frontier and a means to get to Faraway Island happens soon after the events of those games, then Red would follow suit with that and end up getting his Mega Ring right here in Hoenn. And this wouldn't affect the Johto timeline of things either, because we don't have any Johto games that follows the Mega Timeline. So assuming we did have one, the battle between Ethan, Chris, or Lyra and Red on Mount Silver would go the same way, except Red would Mega Evolve one of his Kanto starters and save that as his ace, the starter that has the type advantage against the starter that you initially picked. With Johto in general though, I do think that some extra tidbits of Red lore would have been good before the climactic fight. For example, with Team Rocket returning, it seems like it would only make sense for people to let Red know so he could help take care of it. So during Team Rocket's return, if Professor Oak just met up with the player character or gave a call and gave some lore about Team Rocket in Kanto 3 years ago and how a child of your age managed to defeat the whole organization back then, but how for the past year, Oak has not been able to get in touch with this boy, his grandson's rival as he's gone for some harsh training, and how he sees the same trainer in you that he once saw in Red, and possibly an even better one, I think it would have made for some good foreshadowing and build-up, and it's something I for sure would add to Red's appearance in the Johto region. Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum all happen around the same time as Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and we once again need to make it so that one of these games happens slightly before the other. But we run into a major issue that we didn't have to face when it came to the Kanto and Hoenn games. For the Heart Gold and Soul Silver Arceus event in the Sinnoh ruins, Ethan or Lyra meet up with Cynthia, and her dialogue implies that the events of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum have already taken place. This is because she says that she senses a familiar presence when you have Arceus in your party, meaning that she's likely encountered all 3 of these Pokemon in Platinum. So because of this, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum should happen before Heart Gold and Soul Silver, right? Nope. Actually, this timeline of events is worse for 2 different reasons. One, it's because with this, Red can't actually appear in these Sinnoh games because he would just be stuck on a mountain in Mount Coronet, as we just established that he spent the year training there. And 2, the beginning of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl has Barry, Dawn, Lucas, and Professor Rowan investigating Lake Verity. And when it comes to Barry and the player character, they're investigating the lake because of rumors of a Red Gyarados. Rumors that likely started since the news broke out of the Red Gyarados in the Johto region. So here's the best I can come up with. In Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, and BDSP, Rowan returns from his 4-year absence to the Sinnoh region after visiting the Kanto region, which is actual lore and information that is canon to the games. As he spent 4 years there and was a friend of Professor Oak's, it's natural that he would have met Red, as a year after arriving in Kanto would have been when Red's adventure started, and by the time Rowan left Kanto, the events of the Red Gyarados and Mahogany Town may have happened. Maybe the Gen 2 protagonist even became champion, but they have yet to go to Kanto, and so, in this brief period of time, this is where I would have Rowan leave Kanto and return to Sinnoh, because when the Gen 2 protagonists do visit Kanto, Rowan is nowhere to be found. I mean, technically he should be able to be found in the Kanto games as well, but he's not there. It's okay, you get what I'm trying to say. The Gen 4 games would go on as per usual, and it won't be until the post-game where we ever get any mention of Red, because unlike Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, Red has kind of taken a back seat with his fame and recognition, isolated himself with his training, and with the Gen 2 protagonists now having sufficient time on their hands to complete their end of the Kanto journey and their battle on Mount Silver and then some, Red would have climbed down from Mount Silver after his loss and probably gone back to Professor Oak to find more opportunities to grow stronger in battle, but also become a better trainer. In the post-game of the Sinnoh games, upon completing the Sinnoh Pokedex, Oak comes to meet Professor Rowan and introduces the Pal Park, which this encounter would have been the time where Red returns. Red coming in alongside Oak could be reminiscent of Dawn or Lucas being Rowan's assistant in these games, but this would also be where the player character Barry and the assistant all get to learn more about Red, not from Oak, but from Rowan himself, as he would have greeted Red saying it's good to see him again after all these years from Rowan's time in Kanto. Oak would explain that Red has gone through some harsh battling training and needs to freshen up his skills in catching Pokemon again, and so he's decided to help in catching Pokemon at the Pal Park, or Amonis Park if you're playing Doodoo Butter BDSP. The plot would then go on as per usual, and you wouldn't even see Red at the Pal Park, but he would be there at Oak's house in Eterna City alongside Oak with nothing to say because he's Red. But he does give you a strange look that he doesn't give anyone else. A look of a strange kind of familiarity. But anyways, in Platinum, these catching skills will be put to the test. We know from Pokemon Sword and Shield, and I guess technically all the modern Pokemon games, that multiple legendary Pokemon of the same species exist, specifically with the legendary birds having Kanto and Galar forms. And in Platinum, the player character is made to catch the legendary Kanto birds, which are roaming around Sinnoh. Instead of assigning just you to catch the Kanto birds, Oak assigns both you and and Red to go catch them, and explains that Red has caught the legendary birds before, and that this is just the practice he needs to sharpen his skills again. And upon the 3 birds roaming, the moment you catch one of them, the other 2 would stop roaming. And when going to report this to the professor, you find out that Red managed to catch the other 2, and that it's quite the feat that you managed to capture one, as Red has years of experience under his belt. And Oak states that it seems like you'll quickly catch up to him. After this, Red approaches the player and gifts them with the remaining 2 birds. And Oak explains that, as he mentioned before, Red has already caught the legendary birds, so these birds would have a better home with you. So Red not only befriends the player character here in his own silent way, but he also saves you the agony of having to catch roaming legendary Pokemon, basically making him your best friend in these games. Good guy, Red. Black and White is probably the hardest game for me to find a way to insert Red because, well, the game is kind of self-contained to the story of Unova, and it doesn't really have any references to games outside of this one, at least in the main story. Plus, Red anyways appears in Unova 2 years later in Black 2 and White 2, where he appears in the Pokemon World Tournament, so the only thing I could think of here is to somehow connect him to the development of the Pokemon World Tournament, as well as have him appear in the only area that references anything to do with anything outside of Unova, the Great Charizard Bridge. Oh, what's that? The Great Charizard Bridge doesn't exist? Wrong? It most certainly does, because little known fact, the alternative name for the Driftville Drawbridge is the Charizard Bridge. Yeah, you can't make this up, man. You can't make this up. Not only because of the bridge's name, but because the Pokemon World Tournament happens south of Driftville City. So, as the player character and Sharon are crossing the bridge from Nimbasa to Driftvale, right before they encounter Clay, they'll see Red just walk by past them. And once Clay approaches you, he'll talk about how he noticed that you and Sharon have an eye for potential. That the boy that they just saw was Red, a Pokemon master in his own right, and that he was here to test things out for a future tournament project that they hope to have near Driftville City, but that he has matters to attend to in a different region. And then Clay would say something like, but enough about all that. If we don't stop Team Plasma, there won't be any tournament to look forward to, or something along those lines. And the story will progress as per usual. This gives Red a slight cameo, but it's all that's needed considering that, again, he makes a proper appearance in the sequel of these games. So, his appearance in the first games is basically just setup. Clay's statement about Red having to go to a different region also gives reason for the player character and the gym leaders to be the ones to handle the issues with Team Plasma, rather than Red handling it himself, where Red would have spent a bit of time in the region for sure. And because of this, it would have been cool to see N acknowledge Red's presence when you encounter him at Chargestone Cave. Something along the lines of how he met another trainer just like you, one that was veteran despite his young age, and one that didn't say a word, that the hearts of his Pokemon was all the voice that he needed, resulting in N's doubts in his upbringing and ideas accelerating a bit, all because you're not the one and only anomaly, because he recognizes that there are other trainers who have the best interest of Pokemon in mind, just like you. Black 2 and White 2, as we just mentioned, has the Pokemon World Tournament, which is the only appearance that Red needs, and in Pokemon X and Y, we have to position Red in a way where he uses Mega Ring that he got all the way back in Mega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. I mean, technically he would have it for all the games leading up till now in the Mega timeline, but you get what I mean. We have to utilize him well in the post game, because guess what? Black 2 and White 2 takes place at the exact same time as X and Y. So we once again have to find a way to weave in Red to appear in 2 places around the same time in a strategic way. I think the best case of positioning in my eyes would be this, making the assumption that the events of Black 2 and White 2 happened just months before X and Y even begin. That means all the main story and post-game events would have been completed just before X and Y begin. Why? Because technically Red should be there in the post-game of Black 2 and White 2. So to give him buffer time to appear in X and Y in any capacity, we need to give the window of the full main story of X and Y. This again would also give Caleb and Serena the reason to stop Team Flare without interfering, but I guess that's the reason why I've been putting in the post game for most of these scenarios, but that's gonna change. That's gonna change with the upcoming generation. You'll see. But what role could Red have in the post game of X and Y? That's easy. Mega Evolution. Blue is referenced by some random NPC in X and Y, and seeing as how both Red and Blue were in Unova and Black 2 and White 2, I think it makes sense for the two of them to start their duo adventures together and head to Kalos. Blue has reason to visit Kalos because this NPC states that Blue has been here before and he would probably want to learn more about Mega Evolution after the Pokemon World Tournament. Same with Red. After losing, he would have a fire to learn more about Mega Evolution and get stronger in battle, which leads him to join Blue in visiting Professor Sycamore in the Kalos region. There, Sycamore gets reacquainted with Blue and tells Red that he's heard much about him from Professor Oak. And then we, the player character, get to meet the two of them at Sycamore's lab after some time. Sycamore introduces us to the two of them, and while Blue is as snobby as ever, he recognizes our strength as a trainer and sees how by giving us more Mega Stones, it can actually help them learn more about Mega Evolution, and convinces Professor Sycamore to give us new Mega Stones, the 2 Kanto Mega Stones that we didn't receive from Professor Sycamore, and we get this through an exhibition match of sorts. Professor Sycamore lets us borrow his 2 fully evolved Kanto starters, the 2 that we didn't pick, and the corresponding Mega Stones to use in a one-on-one match against Red and Blue. Similar to how you did with Karina and her Mega Lucario. Blue would use the starter that's weak to yours, and Red would use the one that's strong to yours. So let's say you picked Squirtle initially when Professor Sycamore gave you the option to pick one of the Kanto starters, then when you face Blue for a one-on-one fight to test the Mega Stones, you would both be using Mega Charizard. The Mega Charizard that's in your version, of course. And when you face Red, you would both be using Mega Venusaur. Whether you win or lose, you get the Mega Stones of the remaining starter Pokemon from Red and Blue. The characters, not the games. And return the Kanto starters you borrowed to Professor Sycamore. Red, Blue, and Sycamore acknowledge your strength, and Blue comments about how you may even be strong enough to beat Red in a proper battle one day, but not before he does. I know it seems like it's more like a Blue encounter, but this is nothing that we haven't been dealing with already. With the exception of the Hoenn games, Red in each one of these what-if situations has had a spokesperson with him one way or another, and he needs that to develop as he's a silent protagonist. Heck, even him tagging along with other people after Hoenn and Johto is a sign of his growth in learning that he can't do everything alone. With Blue, it may seem like the spotlight is being taken away from Red because Blue himself is such a big character, but that's not true. The 2 are just there to support each other. Blue speaks up for Red, and Red being there gives Blue his drive and adds to part of his snobbiness. But hey, maybe you do want to see a what if video on Blue being in all the regions. And if you do, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and let me know in the comments section. You never know, it may just happen. This also makes it more fun to get Mega Stones rather than just buying them all in a store like how you normally do, and it makes it feel much more earned. And it doesn't discount Red and Blue's progress in any way because it's a one-on-one fight, an exhibition match to test your skills. I thought Sycamore permanently giving you the other 2 starters would have been kind of unfair, so I let that go. But besides that, everything else is pretty hype about this if you ask me. This also sets up their eventual encounter in the Alola games much better, which in that regard, oh boy, were their appearances in Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon disappointing. Which, by the way, did you know that there's only a 2-year jump between Pokemon X and Y and Sun and Moon? Which, okay, that might not be the craziest thing in the world, but when you consider that Black 2 and White 2 are happening around the same time as X and Y, and that Red and Blue look like this in those games, and then suddenly age up and look like this in Sun and Moon, it's kinda crazy. They went from looking like they were 10 to 20 in just 2 years. It's kind of ridiculous, but anyways, when it comes to Sun and Moon, I would keep their appearances in the region here relatively the same, because giving them any extra flavors than this makes them more special than they already are in comparison to the other Battle Tree trainers like Wally and Cynthia, which I don't want to go overboard with that, but I would add one bit of dialogue to the main story of Sun and Moon. When Kukui is talking about the Pokemon League in Alola and how it's being built, he reminisces upon a time where he's battling Lance, and how he got defeated by him. During this bit of dialogue, he could mention that the world is so full of many strong trainers, and that even 2 of those trainers who defeated this Dragon Master are coming to Alola soon. Just a little tidbit like that would have done wonders for the scope of the post-game. Obviously, it's a reference to Red and Blue arriving at the Battle Tree, but it could have even been built up in a way that tells the player that even if they become the Alola League champion, there's still more trainers out there for them to face. That line alone would have done a lot to just string things together. And really, it's all I think that's needed to enhance their time in these games. Maybe have them and all the other Battle Tree trainers also be a part of the Alola League title defense for some extra flavor. Who knows? In Pokemon Sword and Shield, I think Red should be and would be best utilized as a device to show Leon's strength in the games. Because if you think about it, Leon never really displays his strength. It's only ever talked about. Sure, there's an issue near the end of the game where a bunch of Pokemon are Dynamaxing and Leon goes to take care of it and the news covers it, but by this point, you yourself can take care of this no problem. Sure, Leon takes on Eternatus, but you and Hop take care of this issue soon after he loses. There's nothing besides the word of the people to really show his strength here. And so I think another exhibition match with Red will be what's best, but this time Red wouldn't be there in Galar in real time, but rather he was there to face Leon just a few weeks or months before your adventure started, and when you're there with Chairman Rose at the restaurant, you see a rerun of the battle with Red and Leon, and they mention how the clash of the battle was so strong that the power of the equipment went out and the match was left undetermined without a winner. This not only hypes up Leon's strength for the final battle, which I might add is truly a worthy final battle, but it also doesn't demean Leon's undefeated status as a champion or Red's strength in any way. And I don't think it makes sense for Red to take constant L's either for being this powerhouse trainer, so this works out. He has to maintain his aura and strength while appearing in all these regions. Chairman Rose would make a comment or two about how he enjoyed seeing the battle, but he'd make a subtle remark about being annoyed about the waste of energy from the battle, alluding to his future motivations. And that would be it before addressing the main story components, which I don't even know what that was for Sword and Shield because that thing had anything but a story. I also don't want to include Red in the post-game battle tower either because I think it'd be too much back-to-back with Alola. Scarlet and Violet technically has 3 regions when it comes to these games, which is Paldea, Kitakami, and Unova. But for this what if, we're only going to focus on Paldea because it doesn't really make sense for Red to go to Paldea, Kitakami, and Unova along with you for any rational reason. And considering that the player character has 3 different main stories to work with in this game, it's a little hard to position Red's debut in Paldea in relation to the player. But it isn't so difficult to do with another battle-hungry character, Nemona. Nemona in Scarlet and Violet has this whole arc where she basically hides her true potential from the player character and everyone else because she's afraid of being isolated by others for her strength. She feels like she can't be herself around the rest of the students, and this is something that Geeta also recognizes. Her post-game mini-story also has this where certain students are running away from her when she wants to battle them. I think around the time that this story is happening, if Geeta came to surprise her with a gift of sorts and Red appeared right beside Geeta after Nemona was left in anticipation for a bit, it would not only be pretty funny, but it would also add to Red, Nemona, and even Geeta's character. Geeta could have mentioned how she was able to reach Red through a string of connections through the Paldea League. Red, being one of the strongest trainers in the world, would have made Nemona beyond elated. Red would just acknowledge her and us, and an off-screen battle would ensue that we would never know the result of, but one that would make Nemona more comfortable just being herself. It might seem like a dumb reason for Red to be here just for one person, but I think with the way Geeta works, Larry, that she could pull this off. I also think it's in Geeta's heart of hearts to really look after Nemona like this, and Red wouldn't be opposed to it either. But we're not done. We still have a few more games to cover. Legends Arceus, Legends EA, and Champions. Okay, honestly, I wouldn't consider Champions a part of this, but if you had to have Red or any other character in here for one of these what-ifs, there would always be a special boss fight in Champions single-player mode. If it had one. But in regards to the Legends games, I actually wanted to touch upon Red first. Technically, Red doesn't need to revisit Kalos or Lumiose at all here since he's already visited. And I think that would be best. It's not even a full region in Legends EA, it's only Lumiose, which he did already appear in our hypothetical situation X and Y, of course. And so if it were to appear again here, it would be for similar reasons. It's too redundant. And so I think the best Red reference we can do here is a picture of Red, Blue, and Sycamore in Sycamore's lab at the time they were studying Mega Evolution together, just like his picture with Chespin and Garchomp in the lab. This picture could say something along the lines of Professor Sycamore with 2 foreign Pokemon champions from abroad, or something like that, and that should be good enough. But with Legends Arceus, there's a lot more to play with. See, the common theory is that the player character from the Sinnoh games is transported back in time to Hisui with the help of Arceus, which I wouldn't even consider a theory, it's really just a part of the game. And so, our Sinnoh protagonists from the Gen 4 games, who's aged up a few years from their adventures, will be transported here, and they would take on the events of Legends Arceus as per normal. They would beat Volo, and it would still be the hardest fight in the game. But I think one final fight here with the player character in Red would be best, not only because there's no real other insert for Red in these games, but also because it would be a full circle moment for Ray and Akari. Because remember, in our what if with the Gen 4 games, Oak tells us that we may one day catch up to Red, and we're even friends with him. And so, if he were just to appear in a special space-time distortion just for the sake of a battle, an enclosed space-time distortion where Red is pulled by Arceus just for this one battle, it would tie in perfectly with these Sinnoh and Johto games. Here we face a younger Red by crossing the boundaries of time and space, a version from when he had completed his time in Kanto and Hoenn, but before the events of Sinnoh and Johto. This battle is an opportunity to face our friend before he even met us and make Oak's words about us come true. Not only that, but this specific loss could be the reason as to why Red decides to go train on Mount Silver, and also give reason as to why Red's so fond of us and recognizes us in the Gen 4 games. Because with this, even before becoming our friend, he would recognize that we're the same trainer that beat him, that sent him on the journey of growth and training in the first place. The same trainer from his past, and the same trainer from our inevitable future. I'll be having another what if video next month, but till then, you probably want to see a video on Red and his love interest from the manga, or a video on how the Pokemon games treat you differently based on your gender right here. Thank you all to my members, and thank you so much for watching this video.